Right, well, good morning and welcome to this webinar. It's a great pleasure to be with you this morning to explain something of how WeThrive and its subsidiary products can be used by line managers to help with the often difficult task of looking after the people you support as a manager, getting them from where they are now to where you would like them to be, helping them to get past the difficulties, frustrations, and so on, and help them grow as individuals. It's also massively useful, I think, for managers themselves because it makes their lives easier. And as we know, the first rule of change really is to make it easy. If we can make it easy for people to improve the way their staff operate inside their teams, then we can make it easier for line managers to do their daily work as well. And everybody should win as a result of that. I'm Piers Bishop, one of the co-founders of WeThrive. I'm joined this morning by Lauren Rolfe. Good morning, Lauren.
Good morning.
From our customer support team and also curator of the learning content in WeThrive. I don't think when you joined us, you knew you were going to have to get a curator's hat, but you're wearing it this morning. And
I am.
Splendid it looks too. WeThrive came into existence to improve the way that employee experience and employee engagement are handled in the workplace. The whole idea being that for years, obviously, there have been employee surveys which have gathered data, sometimes useful data, about how people are feeling and what they're experiencing in the workplace. But we wanted to be able to move the whole thing on and improve the way that that data is actually used. So what we're going to do this morning is we're going to take a look at the way the whole system works, and we're going to show you how you can actually see the data that you get as a manager. We assume that your organization has bought into WeThrive and it's actually running listening surveys for your staff, and it's producing data from that. I mean, you as a manager are going to be, in all probability, given a log into the system so you can see what your team have experienced, and then it's going to be down to you to do something about it. Now, historically, that was very difficult just to work on the basis of survey data alone, because the surveys would produce data, but they didn't actually then directly relate it to what you as an individual might do and how that might be useful to the people you're working with. What we've done here is built a system that takes survey data and then explains what it means, distills out of it recommendations for actions that would be useful to the team, and then provides material to actually support you as a manager in making some sense of that and doing something useful with it. So, Lauren, if you don't mind, as you spend a lot of time with the system we're talking about here today, can I ask you just to explain what it's like for a manager, what you get when you first get your login and what you have to do with it?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing to explain is what happens when you are given access. So the first thing, when you're given access to your team's results, someone in your organisation will have set you up with access. And when they do, you will automatically receive an activation email, which asks you to set a password for your WeThrive login. If a survey report has been shared with you, you may also receive a second email to let you know that the results are ready to view in your account. But it's important that you activate your account and set a password before trying to view your results. So please click through on your activation email before doing anything else. Now, once you have activated your account, you can log in and view your reports. This will be the dashboard that you see. And on this page, you will have a list of all of the survey shares that someone has shared with you. To view the reports for your survey, you can click on this bar graph icon here. Now, the reports page is excellent for comparing different segments or individuals within your team if you're on a one-to-one version of WeThrive. On the far left, you will see the purple bar, which is the overall engagement score for the people included in your view. Then you also have the averages for each area of our 4C model, what we call the cognitive capability, connection and confidence area.
We'll just explain that a little more deep depth when we get to the analysis
Yes.
in full on the next page in a second.
Yes. And if you have smaller groups within your team, you'll be able to see a breakdown of their scores from the lowest scoring team on the left to the highest scoring on the right. If you're on the individual version of WeThrive, you can also compare individual scores against each other, and you will have the option to do so using the team filter, where you can switch it to individual and you will have every individual scores against each other there. You can scroll down and see each of the 4C model areas in more detail. And you can also view your team comments, which will give you a bit of context to why people have scored the way they do. But as a manager, you'll probably only have access to one segment of this just for your specific team. And one of the most useful views you will see in the app is the coaching screen. And you can access this via the tab here. Now Piers will go into a bit of detail about what this is showing you.
So Lauren was just referring to the 4C model, the 4 areas of the 4C model. I won't go into it in great depth now, but you can bone up on it by clicking on the help button, the question mark icon at the top of any screen in WeThrive, and that will take you through to a whole bunch of help resources, which we might have time to have a quick look at later. There is also a webinar explaining how the whole 4C model works and what it all means and so on, which you would find enormously useful if you're working with people, whether you're using WeThrive or not in your company, actually, because it says a great deal about what makes people tick or not tick, as the case may be. And again, you can find that through the help content in WeThrive. But just very, very briefly, the system we use is divided into 4 areas. The first is about what people know and how well that knowledge is shared between them, and consequently how well they're cooperating. That's the first 4 bars in red. The second area is about capability. It's about knowledge, skills, and resources, and whether they're actually in practice feeling useful, whether they're going home at the end of the day thinking that they've actually done things capably and well, which obviously is enormously important, because if people do that, then they're much more motivated to come in the next day. Third area in green is social. It's about exchange of tension and interaction between people, which is vital for us as a social species if we want to feel well. It's a great deal of what people actually get out of their enjoyment of work, whether they feel part of something bigger than themselves, and whether they're being acknowledged by the rest of the group or the organization for what they do. And then the fourth area, the blue bars, are a whole set of indicators that are not necessarily things you could affect directly as a manager. You might be able to, but it's unlikely that you're going to be able to just make people feel more secure or give them more control or help them not worry. It's more probable that you're going to have to do something more upstream of that, about the information that they have and the tools they have available and the time and the way they're being dealt with by other managers, and whether they're being acknowledged by the organization. It's more probable that if you deal with the upstream stuff, then these blue bars will improve by themselves, but not necessarily. You do need to take note of what they're saying as well, and we'll come to that in more detail when we come to the actual output screen. So taken together, this view across an employee's or a group's working life shows you whether they have the full engagement and knowledge of the engagement with and knowledge of the tasks they're doing, the reasons why they're doing it, whether they have the materials and time and people and money or whatever it is to be able to actually do it well, and whether they really want to be there and whether it's a safe place for them to be. If all those 4 things are working, then there's a very good chance people will be able to work competently and usefully, get what you need done, and so on. If those things aren't working properly, then it will, without any doubt at all, show up in this screen. Now, what you're seeing here is an average across a group of people, and that's that's a medium-sized group of people, say about 30 people in that view. And what you can see there is that the average view in the colored bars and the maximum and minimum that anybody's scored in the gray lines above and below. And as you drill down, and if you were a manager of an individual team in this organization, then your view might be smaller than that. It might be of 10 or 15 people. As you drill down, so the variations from one item to another will start to become more exaggerated. And if you're on the individual version of WeThrive, which allows you to get down right to individuals' responses in the original questionnaire, then you see what is actually happening for each individual in this organization. You can see from this view actually that what happens in the mean view, in the average view, is very different from some people's experience. So if you take, for example, the extent to which people feel competent at the end of the day, that's the last of the orange bars, then the mean score across the whole group is about 66%. So about 2/3 of the time people go home feeling competent, which is sort of okay, but even that, that leaves some room for improvement. Because you'd like people to be going home feeling they've done things competently all the time, every day, if possible. Obviously not going to get to 100% for everybody all the time, but to the extent that you can improve things, it would be a good thing. But inside that average score of 60-odd%, you can see that at least one person mostly doesn't go home feeling that they've done something useful or well. And equally, there's at least one person who 90% of the time feels that they are doing that. So even inside that average view, there's a lot of variation going on, and the more you drill down and the more conversations you have, then the more you'll open that up and find out what the cause of it is, what's actually going on in the workplace. That's all very well, though. One thing knowing what's happening, the next thing is to know what to do, and that's where WeThrive again steps in. Another thing that we built here is a set of recommendations which pick up from that point.
Yes, so the survey pulls out the top priority actions for you. So here, status was the top priority action, and it's to help people see how their work is recognised by others. It shows you the area score, and it shows you how many people gave some further insights. So on the second page of the survey, where we asked for more feedback, this is where people who would have scored status as one of their lowest areas would have been asked what could be done to improve this. Now, the higher the percentage here, the more dominant the feeling is amongst this group of people. And this would probably show a manager that that's something they would want to act on or read around more. We give some recommendations. So this one would be to look at how frequently positive feedback is being given. And it talks about verbal ad hoc praise being one of the most simple and effective ways to show someone a sign of appreciation. Now, as a manager, that's all well and good, but you might think you need to do a bit more reading around this subject. Or you might just want some tips on how you can get started on putting this into action. Here we've got a blue View Resources button, and this is how you can access all of the resources that are relevant to this output. This is an output page which shows you what the challenge is. It gives you a brief description, and it also gives you our recommendations in bullet points underneath. And then when you scroll down, you'll also see a range of resources. Now, these are resources that we have curated because we think they are useful for tackling that particular challenge. For every output, there are around 6 to 12 pieces of content, all ranging in type of content and the length of time it takes to read or watch it. For example, we've got some TED Talks including thought leaders like Dan Pink, some podcasts, blog articles, PDFs, white papers, exercises, and videos. So we've tried to make it so there is something for everyone and for every learning type. We also have content that we have produced ourselves that Piers has written. And we also recognise that as a manager, you don't always have time to sit down and watch a 20-minute TED Talk. So we have included content that takes different lengths of time to read, watch, or listen to.
Got any content that takes no time at all, because I'm an incredibly busy manager and I don't have any spare time. No, of course that doesn't happen. There's always going to be some investment needed here. But of course, some of this investment doesn't have to be on your part. Some of this material can be shared with the people that you're going to be working with. So for example, if you were going to have a workshop with a group of staff about a particular difficulty that's come up, you could pick a few relevant resources from here that you thought would be useful for them to read and circulate it round and get them to discuss it and get them to consider what would be useful ways to tackle the issue.
Yes, exactly. It's not all on the management. There are pieces of content in here that are meant for employees and to help them, and I can show you some of them in a second. Just to give you an example here, this output was to look at appreciation and help your employees see how their work is recognised by others. You may think this Forbes article, 6-minute read, looks interesting to you, 5 ways leaders rock employee recognition. When you click on this, it'll give you a short description of what will be included in the article and a link straight through to that article. Now, all of this content is free and found on the internet. The benefit is it's specifically related to the challenges that come out of your survey.
That's the problem with the internet, isn't it? There's an infinite range of resources available on the internet, some of which is unbelievably useful, and it's marvelous that it's in the public domain. Some of which is frankly scandalous and should have been disposed of a long time ago. But of course, the internet is so democratic, you can't do that. But that's the point of doing this curation exercise. You know, if you wanted to, you could sit down and you could pull all the relevant and useful material out of the internet, and it could take you months and years. In fact, it would take you months and years, because that's what it's taken us. But we've done the hard work for you, and it's all just sitting there and available for anybody to use. Yeah.
And you can see this example. It was by a well-respected writer and thought leader, Megan Biro, who suggests some tips for approaching employee recognition. And you're not going to remember everything or suddenly know exactly how to action it, but you can jot down some notes to keep in mind, and just the act of writing it down helps us to retain that information. So if we take another example, we also pull out the 3 top wellbeing actions. Now, this is just the actions from the confidence area. And the top one here is headspace.
As I was saying earlier, the blue area of the model, these things are probably consequences of elements of working life or the culture of the company not completely working with the way the human being ticks further upstream. So you can't necessarily affect these things directly, but you do need to consider them. You do need to look at them and say, right, okay, what's the probable implications of that? If, as in this case, people don't think they've got time to think, they haven't got time to stop, reflect, think calmly and so on. So they'll be making some decisions that are questionable. They'll probably not be learning from their own mistakes, because it's when you stop and think that you actually integrate the memory of the last hour and a half or so and turn that into improve actions in the future. So it is worth thinking about, it's worth looking at, it's worth considering what, if anything, you can do about it. And it is important because in this case, staff have time to stop and think. And they think it's, in this case, the main reason for that, I think 72% of the time, I think there's something about the culture that expects them to be busy continually. And I guess you do a lot of reviews with managers who are using WeThrive. I guess that's a pretty common problem.
I think headspace comes up a lot. I think it's probably the area that comes out as a top wellbeing action in the majority of reviews I do. I think it's something that everyone struggles with. We live in a world where everything is moving at such a fast pace, and finding time to take breaks is becoming more and more difficult.
Yeah, and on the face of it, it's counterproductive from the organisation, because you think, well, if we let people take more time off in breaks, then they will get less done. But actually, that's not true. So one of the things that has to be done is that people have to start to shift the way they think about what constitutes a break, getting your head out of the screen, as in fact is recommended by the health and safety executive anyway, and onto the horizon, getting some sunshine on your skin and so on. All of these things are necessary for health reasons, but they also actually improve productivity further on in the day and so on. So just reading about it, getting the context right, and learning how people might be encouraged to take the right kind of breaks for the right sort of time at the right times in the day could be useful to the organisation rather than counterproductive.
Absolutely. And if this was something you were interested in, again, you could click your View Resources button, and you'll have your description and recommendations for helping staff find time to take breaks and rest periodically. And in the resources here, you'll see first you've got a piece of content by us, which looks at what employers can do to make sure employees don't burn out. But it's important to note, again, like Piers said earlier, that there are many resources that are suitable for managers to share with employees to help them be proactive in addressing the challenge. So, for example, this BBC article about how to cope with email overload, which I'm sure is something that is familiar to many of us.
Especially in the BBC, actually. Email overload is a major problem.
Yes, exactly. So you can just, again, click through to the article and you can share this with employees or write down some tips to give them. And yes, just gives you some more resources to think about how you can tackle that challenge.
That's extremely useful. And one of the nice things about the system we've got here is that you don't actually have to be a WeThrive subscriber to use it. If you're thinking about using WeThrive, if your company has been wondering about whether to do it or not, and you just happen to be here out of interest, you can go to academy.wethrive.net and you can browse everything that's in our learning resources just like that, free of charge. You don't need to log in or set up a username or anything like that. If you are a WeThrive user, then it automatically gets curated back to the suggested action outputs from the WeThrive system. But you or anybody you like, you can share this with, can just click around in the resources here. And if you just take a look under employee resources, you see there are various different things that might be useful to employees, like how to actually develop your role and encompass more skills and start to take on bigger responsibilities. Getting on with others, how about that's about communication and collaboration, negotiating with other people in the workplace. The succeeding at work area is about how to cope with the multiple different demands of being at work, and actually manage to make a success of the work while at the same time managing the demands that it's putting on you. Things that are useful inside that, like time management and other well-being resources, are all to be found in there. And then equally for managers, managers have their own needs too. Some of them, of course, come under the employee banner. The well-being stuff is just as relevant to managers as it is to employees. But then communicating for managers is different probably from communicating for employees. Understanding the needs of the people you're working with as a manager, and so on and so on and so on. All of this stuff is curated particularly for managers. So you can click around in there. Please feel free to share any content you find in there with people that you work with or for. And also let us know if you actually have favorite bits of content that you found very useful yourself in your own management practice and you think should be in here. Then please do contact us via hello@wethrive.net, and we would be delighted to curate anything relevant into here and make it available to the general public as well as to WeThrive users.
Yes, we're always looking for new useful content to add to our library, so yes, please do get in touch with us.
Back to the actions. So this is the set of actions that comes out of this graph. This graph might look a little complicated, but actually it contains a whole load of really useful information. And there are some things in here that we can see because we've been interpreting these graphs for a long time that just stick out as things that you might immediately want to get stuck in and do something about as a manager. But because it's not always immediately obvious, and particularly when you've got more people in a view like this, the system, as we said earlier, does some analysis, and out of it, it produces a whole set of recommendations, 3 for the upstream area, the first 3 areas of the 4C model, and 3 for the downstream area, the things that are emotional indicators of difficulty that you might not be able to control directly, but you might want to do something about nonetheless. Now, these actions are recommended by a system that doesn't know anything about the context inside your organization. It knows what people are saying, it can read what people have actually said in the listening survey, but it doesn't know what's about to change anyway. It doesn't know about seasonal pressures, it doesn't know about what kind of industry you're in. So the only thing, two things really that I'd say about interpreting the actions that come out of the system. One is that things aren't a problem unless they're actually a problem. And we've never encouraged people to work on engagement scores or WeThrive scores, which are very closely related to many other engagement measure scores as well, actually, for their own sake. Just saying, right, okay, our target this year is to get the engagement score from 63% up to 72%. It might accidentally generate some useful results for the business, but it isn't actually focused on and targeted at the things that the business is finding difficult. So in looking at these recommendations, we have to say, first of all, what is it that you're trying to achieve as an organization? Is it to reduce staff turnover? And if so, is this problem actually affecting staff turnover? If you think it is, then clearly it's something you should prioritize very highly. Is it something that's going to change anyway? Supposing you've got, as a lot of organizations do have, headspace pressures at particular times of year because of seasonal demands on the business. Well, it may well be that that's something that comes up twice a year and everybody accepts it. There's a sort of heroism or stoicism that goes with it inside the organization. Crikey, another week and we'll be out of this, and then poof, we'll be able to take our holidays. And everybody's happy with that because it's part of the way the industry works and so on. Then again, it's not so much of a problem for the organization as a whole. However, within that average view, there is going to be a distribution of people who go all the way from don't care a hoot to this is really killing me, and you need to know who is where. So if the minimum line on the graph is showing quite low for a particular area, even though the average is healthy, you still really ought to be investigating where the team is experiencing the pressure and whether people in the team are prepared to share that those pressures affect them directly. And if you are on the individual version of WeThrive, where you can see right down to individual people's scores, and about half our clients are, and I think that's going to grow in the future as we move towards a culture of greater personal disclosure and wanting more individual personalized help out of the organizations that we work for and with. If you're on the individual version, then you can actually look through the individual employees and see who it is who's really suffering and find out why that is and what they think is causing it and what might be done to get it from where it is now to a place that would be less dangerous for them. Because you will undoubtedly find inside a group of 20 people that there are a number, probably 3, 4, maybe more, people who are really uncomfortable and whose personal experience of work wouldn't be pulled out by just the average score alone.
So you've done your reading around a specific recommendation. So you've decided that you would like to act and show staff more appreciation for the work they do. You've read your resources. You may have shared some with your team or your employees. The next thing to do is to actually create an action. And you can do this using our action tracking tool. All you have to do is click Create Action. And what this does is it automatically pulls through the output title for you and the description, as well as a link to the relevant resources. And you can then edit the description and make it more relevant to the exact action that you'll be taking. You can set a due date to make sure you have a deadline for completing it, and you can also track its progress. Now, keeping track of all of your actions in here just helps you keep a log of everything that you have done to try and improve the working lives of your team as a result of them giving up their time to give you their feedback. And you can also choose whether this action applies to a specific individual in your team, and that will only be available on the individual version of WeThrive, or it will pull through that it's for your team as a whole. Now, once you're happy that your action is ready and you decide it's in progress, you can click on Save Action. And this is where you will have a list of all of the actions that you are taking off the back of the survey.
And that's really useful because, historically, employee experience or employee engagement surveys have suffered from a number of problems. One being that they produced an average figure, which then got put on the wall and nothing happened. And then people started breaking that down a little bit, but still it was not directly related to what individual managers were going to do. And we've tried to solve that problem by turning the outputs from the survey directly into line manager actions. And then there was always the problem of whether anything actually happened off the back of it. And with this system, we can say, okay, for the things that are really important, we'll create actions, then we can track their progress. The manager in the tier up in the hierarchy can see what is actually happening for the actions that have been set up lower down. And the overall strategic view shows all the actions that are going on inside the organization. So the company knows what's being done in response to the survey. What's vital in change is that it happens in a timely kind of way. It happens on the things that are causing the most disruption to the people who are actually doing the work, and that it's easy. If you make change easy, then it's so much more likely to be followed through. It's so much more likely to stick and to create a window in which you can then investigate further into what else we could do that would be useful to people and help them to feel better about their work and get more done as well. So we've tried to build a system that supports a logical cycle of change. We listen to what people are experiencing, we analyze that, understand where the difficulties and frustrations might be, show managers what's happening and why, and what they need to do about it, give them supporting resources that they can share around with their employees or understand themselves in order to help them make better interventions, and then track the interventions that happen. Now, if all that happens well, you'll end up with a workforce that is profoundly grateful, because things that they previously found frustrating and difficult will have become easier. And that'll reduce the burden on them, the emotional burden of going to work, make going to work a more positive and happy experience. In that context, people will do more for you because of the way we just reciprocate as human beings. If you do something for people, they will do something for you back. Positive or negative, I'm afraid it gets followed through. So doing this in this way creates a workforce which is more likely to cooperate with management, more likely to work harder and better, and then life just gets better all round for everybody at work. So that's what we built in WeThrive. We hope it's useful to you as a manager. You can contact us with any questions about how it works. We are always keen to help people who've just taken on the WeThrive system to understand the full contents of it, the full potential of it, because we want you to use it usefully and well so that it actually makes your staff's working lives better, which is what WeThrive is all about. So that's, I think, all we have to say for this morning, except that there is always scope in these webinars to ask any further questions that occur to you. Somebody's asked whether we can pass on material to the team before we even start the survey. Now, that's a really interesting question. I think the most important thing sure, it could be incredibly useful to go into the resources here and to look around in here and say, okay, what could be useful to Jim or Jane? It's okay, there's something in here about time management, that'd be nice to pass on to them. The only thing is, if you pass on resources before the survey actually starts, it might start a hair running in their mind. It might start them thinking, what's the implication of that? What are they going to try? And are they going to try and get me to do more work? Is that why they want me to be more efficient, and so on? So it might set up a question. And I think it's really important when managing a whole survey process that expectations are managed really well from start to finish. We encourage people with all our heart to start to approach this whole process in the most open and honest way. So you say to staff, ideally, we genuinely want you to tell us exactly what you're experiencing, good and bad, what's working, what's not working, why you think it's not working. Tell us as much as you possibly can. And if you would do that, please, then in return, we will do whatever's practicable, because obviously we can't do things that are not sustainable or that don't work for the company as well. But we will do whatever's practicable to make those areas of work better for you. Now, if you can start in that vein and then get information and then share resources which are relevant to problems that people have already explained they're experiencing, that won't be a surprise to them, because in the process of filling out the survey, they'll have become aware that they've got a problem with this or that or the other. One of the nice things about filling in the WeThrive survey is that it makes you think more about the reasons why work feels like this or that to you. So the question then won't come out of the blue, it won't start any hairs running, and it'll be relevant to something that is already an unanswered question in those people's minds. So I just say think carefully about it. But if you're not doing surveys at all, if you're not using WeThrive, you're not using another survey platform, and you think there's something useful on time management here that would be useful to Jim or Jane or whoever, the whole rest of the team, then by all means, why not call a meeting and say, look, I've just got a feeling that some people here are probably experiencing more burden from work than they need, and I think there are some things we can do to improve time management, so that might be to everybody's interest, so why don't we sit down and talk about it? By all means do that and share it as widely as you can, provided the expectation is set right in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, that's it, I think, for today. No more questions have come in over the system. So thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. We will go back to the friar's balsam and the boxes of tissues, because as you can hear, the cold season is upon us now. But I hope it isn't with you. I hope you have a good rest of the day at your workplace today. And if you get the opportunity to try WeThrive, we'd love to hear from you. hello@WeThrive.net. From me, Piers Bishop.
And me, Lauren Rolfe.
It's goodbye for today.
Goodbye.